Let's take a dive into what would happen if history went perfectly for the ancient Indian civilization of the Mauryan Empire. Already extremely successful and a Goliath of its time, what if things only got better for Chandragupta and his descendants? How far could they have gone, and what would their empire have looked like? This is the Mauryan Empire, and it was founded in 321 BC and lasted for just about 130 years. It was a high watermark for ancient India at the time and saw the presence of monumental historical figures such as Chandragupta, his son Bindusara, and his son Ashoka. The cultural achievements of the Mauryans were exceptional. Not only did they operate a stable economy and trade network, they also successfully assimilated cultures into their empire. The military was also a force to be reckoned with, and were estimated to have 500,000 soldiers, 30,000 cavalry, and 9,000 war elephants. How did the Mauryan decline in our timeline? As with any empire, it's not just down to one reason, but a combination of factors. Chief amongst these was the relative weakness of Ashoka's successors and the rise in power of the regions. As the empire grew, it became more diverse, which saw a series of revolts in different parts of its territory. Finally, the empire was further weakened by regional rivals, such as an invasion by the Bactrian Greeks to the north. The empire's legacy is remarkable and has come to be known as one of India's Renaissance periods. But now, let's dive into what would happen if history went perfectly for the empire, its rulers, and its subjects. We should ask ourselves what conditions led to this continued period of growth. To keep it simple, let's assume that the Seleucid Empire to the west was even more weakened than in our timeline due to the wars of Diadochi. Additionally, the Greco-Bactrians to the north may have been under renewed pressure from the nomadic steppe warriors. Firstly, we would expect the borders of the empire to be far greater than they were in our timeline. The Himalayas serve as a natural boundary to the north, so let's assume that the empire expands to the south into southern India and what is now Sri Lanka, by taking on the Tamil kingdoms in this region. The expansion also goes east into Southeast Asia, and the minor kingdoms and chiefdoms who were present in this region. Lastly, and probably most dramatically, the Mauryan would have had to expand into the west and northwest, into Central Asia and Mesopotamia. This would have seen a monumental clash with the Seleucid Empire, the largest successor state to Alexander the Great's Macedonian Empire. The Mauryans would have also had to overcome the Greco-Bactrian kingdom in what is now Afghanistan and Central Asia. These struggles would have in no doubt deeply challenged the Mauryan, stretching them to their limits. But, backed by a vast pool of manpower, immense quantities of natural resources, and highly capable leaders, they would have eventually succeeded in their conquests. But we shouldn't expect these expansions to only be military conquests, although conflict would have almost certainly been inevitable. Some neighboring states would have simply joined voluntarily, either because they feared the Mauryans' military might, or they saw the huge potential in economic gains they could make by being part of such a large federation. Take for instance the trading states along the East African coast and the minor kingdoms in what is now the Indonesian archipelago. Ancient India was known to be an active trading center, so it wouldn't be unexpected for the empire to expand along its major sea trade corridors, such as into what is now Java and parts of the Middle East. The Mauryan Empire was estimated to have 50 to 60 million inhabitants at its peak. With its conquests and expansions west, south, and eastward, it's not hard to imagine its population to touch 100 million or more. As the empire gets larger and has more access to resources and manpower, we would expect its military capabilities to grow significantly as well. This would not only be in its army and navy, but potentially research into exotic and new forms of warfare and ballistics, such as advanced catapults, or even advancing rocket technology far earlier than what happened in our timeline. The Empire's ground forces could swell into the millions, and be made up of a whole range of categories. For example, archers, sling throwers, spearmen, sword bearers, and even primitive musketmen. But let's pretend that research was done into gunpowder and rocketry. Could we have seen huge artillery pieces capable of smashing enemy armies and city walls at great distances? or elephants and cavalry carrying firearms and cannons. Such a huge number of forces would have been a sight to behold. If the empire expanded over the oceans, they would also need a large navy. During this period, the technology in our timeline saw basic ballistics being used, such as catapults, or the use of boarding tactics to take enemy ships out of the fight. By shifting artillery onto ships, we could have seen a vast armada bristling with cannons. Imagine these ships turning up to enemy harbours and forcing its capitulation, or blasting pirates and enemy vessels out of the water. Ancient India was well known to be an administrative powerhouse. With a large population and a reasonable and ever-increasing literacy rate, the labour force to help fuel a competent bureaucracy wouldn't be an issue. By ushering in peace and stability and removing hard borders, we would expect information to move at speed between different areas of the massive empire. We could expect to see a vast road system with military posts, built to allow message bearers to cover hundreds of kilometers in a single day. This would naturally make administration of the empire far easier. Like every empire, we would expect changes to how it was administered to occur over time. This could start with more labor-intensive aspects, such as revenue collection. The tax revenues that were collected would be impressive. Millions of tons of gold and immense quantities of produce. This would only serve to fuel the empire's power evermore, both from a cultural and military perspective. The breadth and scope of the empire would be immense, ranging from the sea and coastal plains to jungle, grassland, desert, and impressive mountains. This would naturally extend to control over the resources in these areas. The Mauryans would become an even bigger economic power than in our timeline, with access to a range of metals, spices, and agricultural produce, not to mention the vast production capacity of millions of craftsmen. Ancient India was well known to be a huge pool of artisanal talent. Just look at the vast number of impressive monuments and buildings. If the empire expanded its influence and territories, we would expect to see such an array of amazing buildings throughout the empire and beyond. India has always been a melting pot of religions and cultures. Its massive population served as a place where many religions flourished and commingled, from Jainism, Buddhism, and Hinduism to new arrivals such as Islam and Sikhism. The Mauryan Empire's stability would have been a crucible for religious study and amalgamation. As a vast and powerful empire, we would expect this process to stay the same. Ushering in a period of peace and stability, religious groups would flourish, influencing each other and leading to unexpected changes when compared with our current timeline. Perhaps this would be the establishment of large Hindu and Buddhist communities in the Middle East, and the introduction of Islam into India far earlier than our current timeline, aided by strengthened trade, administrative, and military infrastructure. As with any good story, a decline would be inevitable. But what would lead to this vast, powerful, and influential empire to fall? Well, in my opinion, it wouldn't be due to any external factors, but really it would be the empire itself. The great array of cultures, religions, and languages involved would naturally lead to regionalization of identities. And even more naturally, some of these communities may even want to go their separate ways. But being optimistic, perhaps the empire adapts to these changing circumstances. By providing greater regional autonomy and self-governance to different regions and groups, it could help to avoid a complete splitting of the empire. In this way, it would function much in the same way as India does today, or the European Union. A union of people strengthened by the collectiveness, but respected for their diversity. Well, that's it for today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed our video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe. We're looking forward to making more great content for you to enjoy. See you in the next video.